The day I found a 70-foot cell tower rising out of my alfalfa field like some kind of alien skyscraper, I wasn't mad, not yet. I was confused, mildly amused, and very concerned about the cows. They were standing around it in a circle like it was the monolith from 2001, A Space Odyssey. I stood there in my pajama pants, coffee in hand, blinking at the blinking red light at the top. The kicker? I hadn't signed a single permit. Not a lease, not a call, not even a postcard. It was just there, overnight like HOA-sponsored crop graffiti. That's when it hit me. Either I was dreaming or someone had lost their damn mind. And as I sipped my coffee and walked up to the workers installing metal cables into my soil, one of them cheerfully waved and said, "You must be from the HOA. Great spot you picked." My only response was a slow blink and a quiet, internal "oh hell no." Rewind 48 hours. My life was pretty standard. I live just outside the suburban belt in a sleepy HOA-governed community that prides itself on beige paint, mandatory grass height, and neighborhood snitching. My property was technically on the border, 10 acres of inherited farmland that I'd maintained more out of love for my grandfather than any desire to farm. Still, I kept the field tidy, grew a bit of alfalfa, and enjoyed the luxury of not hearing leaf blower wars every weekend. The HOA left me alone, and I left them to their yearly wine and cheese costume dramas. That changed the minute Karanet Cartwright got elected HOA president. Imagine someone who thinks Martha Stewart is too casual and Vladimir Putin isn't strict enough. Karanet was the type who wrote parking citations on napkins and handed them out at barbecues. She complained once that my wooden fence didn't aesthetically match the HOA's theme, even though my land wasn't under their jurisdiction. I'd smiled, nodded, and then painted the fence lime green for a week just to mess with her. So yes, we had history, but even she wouldn't be bold enough to authorize a cell tower on land that wasn't hers, right? Apparently she would. When I finally got past the amused construction crew and reached the on-site supervisor, he handed me a crumpled one-page copy of what he claimed was a community access agreement. It had my address listed, but the name on the landowner line was HOA President K. Cartwright. My name wasn't on it anywhere. The signature looked like it had been scribbled by someone using a Sharpie while being tasered. The effective date? The day before. "Where'd you get this?" I asked him. "From your HOA?" He replied, clearly uncomfortable now. "We were told this field was part of the community green belt." "This is a private farm," I said slowly, emphasizing each syllable like I was speaking to someone who thought trees were optional. "Look, man," he said, hands raised. "We're just doing the install. Permits are filed. We were told it's legit." "Permits with whose name on them?" "HO," he muttered, eyes shifting. That's when the rage started to simmer under the surface. A slow boil hidden beneath my calm farmer exterior. I wasn't a guy who yelled. I didn't throw punches or flip tables. I filed paperwork. I followed the rules. But I also used to write lease contracts for corporate real estate clients before deciding city life wasn't worth the ulcers. I knew the language. I knew the loopholes. And I knew, without a doubt, someone had just committed fraud using my land. I told the crew to stop work immediately and left without waiting for a reply. They hesitated. I smiled and said, "Or I'll park my tractor in front of your supply truck. Your move." They paused construction. 2 hours later, I was in my home office, pulling out the land deed my grandfather had filed decades ago. Crystal clear boundaries, parcel number, county stamp, the field, and everything on it was mine. The HOA line ended 5 feet past the mailbox. What the hell was going on? So I did what anyone in my position would do. I drove down to the HOA clubhouse. There, in full glory and badly applied foundation, stood Karanet Cartwright, giving a speech to a small group of residents about how the new tower would bring 5G harmony to the community and position us as a forward-thinking neighborhood. I waited until she finished, then approached her with the fake lease in one hand and a photo of the tower in the other. "What the hell is this?" I asked. She smiled like I just handed her a compliment. "Oh, isn't it marvelous? It's going to increase property values. On my property." "Oh, don't be silly," she laughed, patting my shoulder like a schoolboy. It's all part of the community. You weren't using that field for anything important. Besides, the lease only lasts 10 years. You leased land you don't own? She blinked, then gave me that smug smile again. Technically, it appears to be part of the green belt, and no one ever really uses it. You can't gatekeep nature, dear. I stared at her, then said slowly, I hope you like lawsuits. Excuse me, because you're about to be the star defendant in one. That night, I contacted an old friend from my days in corporate law, now a real estate litigator. I sent him everything, the fake agreement, photos of the tower, a copy of my deed. He replied in under 5 minutes. They're screwed, he said. Play dumb for now. Let them dig deeper. Then hit them hard. And that's exactly what I did. While the HOA paraded around bragging about their new revenue stream, and while Karanet published an article titled, Raising the Bar on Bars in the community newsletter, I was quietly preparing the ultimate checkmate, because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the telecom company had already signed a 10-year lease with the HOA and paid the first 2 years up front. On paper, the tower was worth almost $100,000 a year in rent, and none of that money was going to me. But it would. Because once I proved the land was mine, the lease would be void, and the telecom company, they'd have to come crawling back to me. The next morning, I stood on the edge of my field with a measuring wheel in one hand, a mug of reheated coffee in the other, and a grin that could split a boulder. It was game time. I didn't just want to stop the HOA. I wanted to make them regret every smug newsletter, every backhanded complaint, every faux cordial wave they'd sent my way. And lucky for me, I had the perfect ammunition. Hard facts, old documents, and a suspiciously well-organized binder from my grandfather labeled, just in case they try something stupid. Inside was everything: original property surveys, title transfers, easement agreements, and the golden ticket. A certified copy of the deed with GPS-plotted coordinates, filed 27 years ago, notarized in bold ink. I headed down to the county assessor's office like a man on a mission. The clerk recognized me from my brief stint as the tractor guy who built a chicken coop modeled after the White House. So she didn't ask too many questions. I had her pull up the latest GIS land data and compare it to the original record. After a few clicks and an arched eyebrow, she whistled. Well, would you look at that, she said. That tower's sitting smack in the middle of your parcel. Can you print that with the current overlay? I asked. She nodded. I left with a color-coded map, time-stamped and signed by the county itself. Exhibit A. On the way home, I stopped at the local telecom office. I asked to speak with the site lease coordinator. A young guy named Trey appeared, wearing a Bluetooth headset and the expression of someone who'd just gotten yelled at for a slow download. I laid out the binder on the desk between us and flipped it open to the deed. Your tower's on my land, I said calmly. Trey squinted at the documents, then clicked around on his tablet. I could see the color drain from his face as he realized what he was looking at. But we signed a lease, he stammered. With the HOA. The HOA doesn't own this land. His voice got higher. But they said, I know what they said. Now let me say something. That lease you signed? It's void, which means you're currently trespassing. Which means I could file an injunction to stop all construction, demand the tower be removed, and sue your company for damages. He looked like a baby bird being asked to do algebra. I don't want to do that, I continued, because I understand mistakes happen, but you're going to have to renegotiate with me. And spoiler alert, my rates are higher. That afternoon, Trey called me back. He'd spoken to his legal team. They wanted to meet. That was fast. Meanwhile, Karanet was hosting what she called a 5G celebration mixer at the community clubhouse. I decided to swing by, strictly for entertainment. The place was decorated like a failed tech conference, streamers in Wi-Fi signal shapes, cupcakes with frosting shaped like cell towers, and a very unfortunate ice sculpture that was supposed to be a SI. Now bar icon but looked like it had melted out of shame. Karanet was holding court in the center, sipping a glass of white wine and fielding compliments from residents who clearly didn't understand what was happening behind the scenes. Oh yes, it's all thanks to the HOA's vision, she said. We negotiated a very favorable deal for the community. Revenue from the tower will go toward pool upgrades and repainting the tennis courts. I stepped forward. Funny thing about that revenue, I said. She turned, her smile twitching just a little. Oh, hi you. Nick, I reminded her. Yes, right, of course. How's the field? Great. Even better now that it's bringing in high-frequency radiation and legal opportunities. A few residents looked over. Karanet lowered her voice. Is this really necessary? I think it is, I replied. Especially since I spoke to the telecom company today. They're not thrilled about being duped into leasing land from someone who doesn't own it. Her lips flattened into a tight line. I didn't dupe anyone. You signed a policy with my property on it. That's fraud. More heads turned. Her composure cracked. It was a misunderstanding. No, it was an assumption. And now that assumption is going to cost your Community Enhancements Fund a lot more than you planned. I left her standing there, frozen mid-sip. Back home, I reviewed the draft lease the telecom company had offered. It was a pretty standard 10-year agreement, except now they were offering triple the original HOA rate, plus back pay for the days they'd already used the land. I was to receive an upfront signing bonus, monthly rent, and annual escalation. There were clauses for tower maintenance access, indemnity protections, and environmental responsibility. I sent it to my friend the lawyer, who called me 10 minutes later, cackling like a villain. Sign it, he said. And then buy yourself something ridiculous. I signed. The money hit my account 2 days later. More than enough to replace every fence post, upgrade my tractor, and build a new barn. But I had other plans. I used a chunk to consult with a land use specialist and file a formal notice of correction with the county, ensuring that no one, HOA or otherwise, could ever pretend to own or control my field again. I also had a new sign made for the edge of the property. It read, Private property. Tower operated with permission of actual owner. I even underlined actual. The final cherry on top, I leaked the new lease terms to a couple of well-connected residents who were already irritated with the HOA's spending habits. They did the rest. Suddenly, people wanted to know where all the money from the original lease went, why Karanet had signed it unilaterally, and why there had been no vote. The HOA board started to fracture. Rumors flew. Emergency meetings were called. And I sat on my porch with a cold drink and a pair of binoculars, watching it all unfold like a nature documentary on karma. The best part was yet to come. Because as much as Karanet wanted to pretend this was just a bump in the road, I knew better. She thought this was about a tower. But this wasn't about towers. This was about power. And she had just lost all of it. By the time the HOA realized they'd lost control of the cell tower, I was already cashing my second monthly rent check. The telecom company had wasted no time in cutting ties with Karanet and her band of rulebook warriors. They'd reprinted all documentation, corrected the county registry, and sent me a welcome package that included a branded stress ball and a coffee mug that said, Partner in Connectivity. I didn't know whether to laugh or frame it. Either way, I was now their official lessor, and my field was officially a profit machine. But just because the ink was dry didn't mean the fireworks were over. If anything, the real show was about to begin. I started to notice subtle changes in the neighborhood. Karanet was quieter, only slightly, but enough for people to notice. Her usual power-walking patrols around the block were replaced with hurried dashes between her garage and the HOA clubhouse. The 5G celebration banner mysteriously disappeared overnight. Most telling of all, the stream of HOA newsletters stopped cold. No more chirpy bulletins about hedge height regulations or trash bin etiquette. It was almost as if someone had cut the signal. Poetic, really. But things escalated when the HOA board called an emergency town hall meeting. The flyer, printed on paper so thin it practically disintegrated in your hand, read, Urgent community concerns. Attendance required. They booked the community center, brought in folding chairs, and even wheeled out that sad tray of grocery store cookies they use for anything resembling an apology. I showed up 10 minutes early, mostly because I knew something deliciously stupid was going to happen. The place was packed. Residents murmured, eyebrows furrowed. Karanet stood at the front of the room, flanked by 2 other board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She cleared her throat and launched into the kind of speech that sounded like it had been workshopped by a PR firm made entirely of goldfish. As many of you are aware, she began, there have been developments regarding the cell tower and its associated revenue stream. There were murmurs, some polite, some not. I want to clarify, she continued, that this project was initiated with the best interests of the community in mind. Unfortunately, due to certain unforeseen complications regarding land boundaries, the arrangement with the telecommunications company had to be adjusted. A hand shot up in the back. It was Dale, a retired contractor known for his zero-tolerance attitude toward BS. Adjusted as in we're not getting any of the money? Karenet's lips twitched. The arrangement was altered to better reflect property ownership. Another hand went up, then another. Questions started flying faster than she could answer. Where did the original payments go? Who authorized the lease? Why wasn't the community informed before signing? And then someone asked the question I'd been waiting for. Is it true that the HOA claimed to own land it didn't? That one hit like a dropped microphone. Karenet hesitated, then launched into a rambling explanation involving maps, historical usage patterns, and something about satellite discrepancies. It was pure nonsense, but the crowd wasn't buying it. They weren't mad about the tower, they were mad about the money. HOA dues had gone up that year, and people were expecting a shiny new pool heater, not a scandal involving forged lease agreements and a president who thought a field magically became hers because it looked HOA-ish. When the meeting broke into full chaos, I quietly stepped outside and leaned against the wall, sipping from my mug, the same one the telecom company had sent. It felt appropriate. The next day, my phone rang. It was Trey from the telecom company, his voice upbeat, even cheerful. Hey, just wanted to let you know the payment for the back rent cleared this morning. Also, our legal team finished reviewing the original lease and I asked, pretending not to already know. They flagged it big time. The signatures didn't match county records, and the notary listed on the document hasn't been licensed in over a decade. Technically, it's fraud. Technically. Well, we're not pursuing charges, too messy, but we are filing a formal complaint with the HOA and the county. Just thought you should know. I thanked him and hung up, already imagining Karenet's face when she got that letter. Sure enough, within a week, a copy of the complaint was circulated among residents like a bootleg movie. It had the telecom company's logo in the header and the phrase, fraudulent misrepresentation, in bold across the middle. It was the HOA's equivalent of a meteor strike. People began calling for an audit. Rumors swirled that Karenet had pocketed a consultant fee from the broker who arranged the original deal. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. What mattered was that trust was shattered, and she was at the center of it. Meanwhile, I was having a grand time. I decided to use part of my newfound tower fortune to upgrade my field. Not just the fencing and irrigation, no, I went full petty. I installed a decorative gate with a keypad entry, security cameras that faced the HOA entrance, and a professionally engraved plaque that read, owned and managed by N. Phillips Enterprises. I even added solar-powered uplighting, just in case anyone missed it at night. Then came the best part. I received an anonymous tip. Okay, it was Dale again. That the HOA board was meeting privately to discuss options. Curious, I set up a drone to hover near the clubhouse during the scheduled time. Legally, I wasn't trespassing. The footage it captured was glorious. Red faces, flailing arms, and one board member dramatically tossing a folder across the room. I edited the footage down to a highlight reel and uploaded it, unlisted, of course, and shared the link in a group chat started by the residents. The title, HOA Board in Crisis, a towering mistake. That night, I slept like a baby. A week later, the board called another town hall. This one was different. It was somber. The tray of cookies was missing. Karenet stood at the front, visibly shaken. It has come to our attention that mistakes were made, she said. In light of recent events, and to preserve the integrity of this community, I will be stepping down as HOA president, effective immediately. The room stayed silent. No cheers, no claps, just the sound of quiet justice. She stepped down and walked out without looking back. Her car pulled away from the lot like a getaway vehicle. I watched from across the street, arms crossed, and nodded to myself. The HOA had lost its queen, and the board, they were about to find out what real accountability looked like. After Karenet's dramatic exit from her self-made empire of hedges, newsletters, and forged documents, you'd think the neighborhood would settle into some kind of peace. You'd be wrong. Because petty doesn't retire quietly, it doubles down. The HOA was now a rudderless ship full of angry passengers, and no one was sure if they wanted to bail out or mutiny. With Karenet gone, the vice president, a man named Roy who once yelled at a squirrel for being too loud, stepped in as interim head. His leadership style resembled a confused librarian trying to manage a rave. Meetings devolved into arguments, emails went unanswered, and several residents started mowing their lawns diagonally just to see if anyone would say something. No one did. But Karenet wasn't finished. The queen may have abdicated, but she still had her claws in the curtain. Rumors started popping up that she was filing a civil suit against me. It began with whispers in the neighborhood Facebook group, which quickly exploded into a thread 172 comments deep, including someone's casserole recipe and a heated debate about wind chimes. According to the few coherent comments, she claimed she had historical usage rights to the field and that the land had always been functionally part of the HOA's greenbelt, which, to be clear, was about as accurate as saying the Eiffel Tower is part of Disneyland Paris because it's kind of in the same direction. Then came the letter, thick envelope, fancy lawyer font, return address from a firm with the kind of name that sounded like they did more divorces than real estate law. Inside was a formal complaint. Karenet was suing me for breach of easement, obstruction of community development, and, get this, emotional distress. Emotional distress. As if my alfalfa had personally insulted her in passing. I handed the letter to my lawyer friend, who read it once and immediately began laughing so hard he spilled coffee on his shirt. "She's representing herself," he said, wiping his sleeve. "You're kidding. She's filed it through a discount legal template website." The footer still says, "Insert defendant's name here," on one page. Despite its complete lack of legal merit, we responded officially, just to be safe, filed a counterclaim for trespassing, fraudulent misrepresentation, and unauthorized lease negotiation. I also included a copy of the drone footage and the original deed for dramatic effect. The judge set a date for a preliminary hearing, and I prepared myself for what would surely be the most ridiculous courtroom exchange of my life. Meanwhile, the HOA was trying to distance itself from the whole mess. Roy issued a statement claiming the board had no knowledge of the fraudulent lease agreement and that it was not reflective of the HOA's values, which was rich, considering half the board had signed off on the project back when they thought they were about to get a new jacuzzi. Several residents weren't buying it. At the next open board meeting, one woman stood up and demanded a full audit of HOA finances. Another asked where the initial payment from the telecom company had gone. Roy mumbled something about community operations, but when pressed for specifics, he blamed the printer. The printer. That was when I decided it was time to go from defense to offense. I'd already won the tower. I had the lease, the rent, the land, and Karenet's fake signature framed in my office. But now I wanted the whole system to collapse under the weight of its own incompetence. I reached out to a few residents who'd expressed frustration with the board. We started a coalition. Unofficial at first, just neighbors talking over coffee about unfair dues, unclear rules, and why you couldn't have a wind spinner taller than 24 inches. I gathered bylaws, cross-referenced them with county statutes, and uncovered dozens of violations the HOA had committed over the years. Everything from misuse of funds to improperly approved architectural changes. We compiled everything into a neat little document, 38 pages, footnoted, indexed. We called it the Book of Nope, and then we handed out copies. The fallout was glorious. People who had never shown up to HOA meetings before were suddenly asking questions. They wanted transparency. They wanted accountability. One guy even started bringing a portable microphone so no one could pretend they didn't hear a motion being raised. It was the HOA equivalent of storming the castle with torches and pitchforks, except our weapons were documentation and highlighters. And just when things seemed like they couldn't get any better, I got a call from the county clerk's office. The telecom complaint had triggered a deeper investigation, and they'd uncovered an interesting detail. The notary listed on the original fake lease had their license revoked 12 years ago for notarizing pet adoption contracts without verifying identities. Somehow, this person had signed the document anyway, which meant the lease wasn't just fake, it was criminally forged. I forwarded this information to the HOA board. Roy responded with a single sentence. "We had no idea." The next day, he resigned. With the board now in total disarray, several residents began organizing a petition to hold a vote of no confidence in the HOA itself. They wanted to dissolve it, or at the very least, replace the current structure with something more transparent and accountable. I stayed out of the spotlight, letting the group do their thing, but I may have anonymously donated funds for printed flyers, a website, and lawn signs that read, "Let's make the neighborhood make sense again." As for the lawsuit, it was a train wreck from the moment it started. Karenette showed up, representing herself, clutching a binder overflowing with printed emails and grainy aerial screenshots of my field from Google Earth. She opened with a 10-minute monologue about community unity and the spiritual burden of low cell reception. The judge, to her credit, tried to keep a straight face. My lawyer calmly presented the deed, the lease, and the fraudulent notary records. Karenette objected every 10 seconds, citing vibes and the general will of the people. After 30 minutes, the judge dismissed the case and warned her not to file any further claims without legal counsel. Outside the courthouse, I saw her standing alone in the parking lot, muttering into her phone. I didn't approach. I didn't need to. She'd lost everything. Her position, her credibility, and the thing she valued most: control. Back in the neighborhood, the new interim board scheduled a community vote. The residents decided to slash HOA fees by 40%, redirect remaining funds to transparency software, and begin the process of rewriting outdated rules. A few even reached out to thank me, one bringing over a homemade pie and a bottle of wine with a post-it that read, "Best revenge is residual income." I stood on my porch that night, watching the tower blink against the sky, each flash a reminder that justice didn't always come with sirens or speeches. Sometimes it came with paperwork, patience, and a well-timed drone. The quiet after the storm felt surreal. For the first time in what felt like months, the neighborhood wasn't buzzing with gossip, backdoor meetings, or angry Facebook posts. The HOA had officially been restructured. The new board was made up of residents who actually seemed to care about fairness and transparency. And Karenette had vanished from public life entirely. Word was she sold her house to a family of 6 with 4 energetic dogs, 2 goats, and a very large trampoline that somehow passed the new, far more lenient outdoor equipment guidelines. Poetic justice, really. As for me, my field had never looked better. The grass grew around the base of the tower like nothing had ever happened, and the cows no longer treated it like an alien artifact. The checks from the telecom company continued rolling in, smooth as butter, and I'd begun referring to that corner of my land as the Signal Farm. What started as a violation had turned into a gold mine, and not just financially. The tower had become a symbol, oddly enough, for what could happen when someone finally said no to unchecked power wrapped in pastel polos and passive-aggressive emails. My neighbors started dropping by more often. Some came to ask advice on navigating old HOA clauses. Others just wanted to say thanks. A few confessed they'd been afraid to speak up in the past because they didn't know anyone else was fed up. That part hit harder than I expected. For a long time, I thought I was just being left alone because I was the weird farmer guy with the lime green fence. Turns out silence had been everyone's way of surviving the nonsense. All it took was one well-placed tower to break the spell. One Saturday, I hosted what I jokingly called the Towers and Triumph Barbecue. I set up picnic tables near the field, rigged some lights to the tower's utility pole for ambience, and grilled everything from ribs to roasted corn. People brought homemade side dishes, lemonade, even a few bottles of local wine. Kids ran around screaming, someone brought a portable speaker, and for a brief moment, it felt like a real community. Not a forced HOA-mandated social hour, but something spontaneous, messy, and full of life. The kind of thing no board ever could have planned. Halfway through the evening, Dale walked up with his 3rd plate of brisket and said, "You know, you could probably charge rent just for this view now." He nodded toward the tower, glowing gently behind us. Signals the strongest in town. My daughter gets better internet outside your barn than inside our house. I laughed, but a spark of an idea lit up in the back of my head. He wasn't wrong. In fact, the telecom company had already reached out, asking if I'd consider adding a second unit for an upcoming 6G pilot. Apparently, the location was prime, elevated ground, no obstructions, and smack in the middle of a growing population that needed more bandwidth than their HOA could regulate. That got me thinking not just about towers but about land. I had more of it than I needed and a reputation now. People knew I'd stood up, navigated the legal maze, and come out the other side with both my sanity and my bank account intact. What if there were others like me? People with land or homes or small plots caught in legal weirdness with HOAs that didn't know when to quit. So I did what any ex-engineer turned farmer turned accidental hero would do. I started a small company. Nothing flashy, just a local consulting service called Boundary Line Solutions. Our slogan was simple: know what's yours, keep it yours. I offered affordable consultations for people dealing with HOA overreach, helped review land use agreements, and partnered with a few real estate attorneys who were tired of watching power-hungry board members steamroll homeowners. Within a month, I had a wait list. Turns out my story had gotten around more than I realized. Someone had posted a write-up in a Reddit thread about entitled HOA horror stories, and it went viral. The headline read, "HOA built a cell tower on this guy's field without asking, so he took ownership and tripled their rent." The comments were wild. People from all over the country were sharing their own tales of HOAs trying to dictate paint shades, deny service dogs, or ban clotheslines. Apparently, my story had become the poster child for what happens when you combine legal knowledge with pettiness and patience. I leaned into it, started offering virtual consultations, wrote a few guides, even did a podcast interview with a housing rights advocate who called me the HOA Whisperer. I wasn't trying to be famous, but if people were listening, I wasn't going to waste the microphone. And then one more surprise arrived. An envelope, plain white, with no return address. Inside was a single note in elegant handwriting. "Congratulations on your tower, Nick. I hope it brings you everything you wanted. P.S. I moved to Fairwinds Acres. New HOA, new start." There was no name, but I didn't need one. Karanet had found a new castle. I chuckled and shook my head. Some people never learn. Still, I almost felt sorry for Fairwinds Acres. Almost. That night, I sat on the porch, drink in hand, watching the lights on the tower blink steadily in the dark. A quiet, rhythmic signal. Everything was calm, peaceful, the way it should be. But I knew better than to expect it to last forever. There'd be another Karanet somewhere. Another HOA with too much authority and not enough common sense. Another land grab wrapped in legal tape. But now I was ready. Because when they come for what's yours, your land, your peace, your sanity, you don't have to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you fight it with facts, with paperwork, with patience, and, if you're lucky, with a cell tower that pays its rent on time. I tipped my glass to the blinking light and smiled. Long live the signal.